When I look at the article that I written over 20 years ago, I'm fascinated by why I wrote it. The reason why I wrote it was because gymnastics was in a turmoil. Not the turmoil that they received later, which was kind of shocking even to me 20 years after I wrote this article. I was writing because the old guard simply didn't want to change. They were too afraid of losing their power to a younger, more technically motor, biomechanically focused audience, which I was one of the spearheads. So I wrote the article to kind of show people really this is what I'm doing. It's not difficult. You can do it too. So that way everybody can keep their independence and not listen to me, but evaluate what I said and put it into their own context and develop their own kids their own way, which is to me the free spirit. It's the American spirit of freedom. Now, I say that as a tagline, not as a reality of politics and government today all over the world, but just, from the spirit. At the same time that I wrote that article, I was actually studying to be a lawyer, and I was dealing with ethics and ethics classes. So I was struggling with a lot of ideas. Ultimately, I decided not to become a lawyer because obviously I couldn't deal with the ethos of what it meant to be a lawyer, more specifically defend the guilty. So, I could have been rich being a lawyer, but I just couldn't do it. So when I moved on in life, went to coach at the university, and then after I did that, I went to business. So in the business world, I thought I was safe. I wouldn't have to deal with all this stuff. And for the most part, it was right. I didn't have to deal with all this stuff. I could just concentrate on business. I could concentrate on deploying technology. I could succeed by being a coach in technology and bringing teams together to create great products for major corporations. So I was rewarded well. When I returned back to sport, it was quite by accident. Technology took me to film. Film took me to back to Mexico to live my retirement. And when I started introducing myself to these young people for filmmaking, once we started doing a film on their struggles from farms to poverty to streets playing music to poverty, I started looking at the big picture and what was going on here. I looked at my own history and who I came from and my history of my family. And then I start realizing that what I did as a young person wanting to help in the gymnastics world was repeating itself here in the soccer world. When I start digging deeper, I start looking at and seeing all the different things that I saw regarding pay to play, acting, all these other things. So I went back to my basics. My basics are what's humanity? Humanity clearly is to help the youth, help the young to prosper and give them a future. That's the basis of humanity. If I had to dial a triangle of what is humanity, it all centers around helping the youth and the next generation. So when I look at this solution, when I look at what happened to the embassy took a cocky attitude that we gave the grant and that's what we do, and you can't ask questions. Of course, I'm a free spirit. So when somebody says that to me, I ask why. I teach my athletes why. Why did we lose? What is it that we could have done different? How can we do it different? And more importantly, when we're on the pitch, how can we think about making things different at the second things are happening? I teach them how to think. That's the future. That is humanity. That's the basis of why I wrote the article to begin with. Teach people how to think so that it's become simplified and they can make it more complicated. As I tell my athletes, first we've got to simplify actions so then we can make it more complicated. So here we are. Why did the embassy say with such cocky attitude that this is what we've done and this is the only way we can do it? Then I started asking FMF the same questions, and I had been for 3 years. What's the national teeth path? They kept coming back with, if they answer, when they finally answer, say it's a national tournament. Well, I'm in FIFA. I'm in FMF. I'm in all these organizations. I paid every club I can walk into, which were many. We went from club to club to club looking for the gateway, looking for the pathway, and there wasn't. Well, I kept looking, but there wasn't. So it was obvious to me from the beginning there wasn't. But I needed to be honest and naive and do what I thought, talk to a lot of people. So I did. I talked to a lot of coaches. I talked to a lot of people. And then I started gathering information. And once again, I found myself the same place I was when I was a young coach with the old system. Didn't want to change guard. And fortunately, the changing guard was the humanity reason to change guard, to help the youth, to give them opportunity, to give them chance, give them hope. Hope is nothing without an actual pathway. So when I started asking these questions, and when they came back and said, well, there's national path, there's no, you have to be in a national tournament. And it wasn't until they started bringing in junior athletes. Now, when they start moving senior athletes from all over the world into the national team, that's different. But when they start using junior athletes without national pathway, with the affiliate issue, the second card thing, all these other things start pointing me back to what I saw in gymnastics. No pathway. In the past, there was no pathway before I wrote that article. There was truly no pathway. Now, of course, the statistics show itself. When you look at the statistics that you see, the junior national team. Now, what am I trying to do? Ultimately, my job is pretty clear. I have 3 athletes. Their parents have given me the trust and hope to help these athletes. I'm what they call an athlete's coach. An athlete's coach values extrinsic over intrinsic and decides which one's more important. An athlete's coach is the coach who's sitting there that once was the athlete, puts himself in the box and says, what do I need to do to prosper this athlete? I'm here to win, yes, but at the same time, I'm here to teach them about humanity. Humanity gives one to the next. Humanity takes extrinsic value and loves it and wraps around their arms around it, but emphasizes the intrinsic value outweigh the extrinsic value. Now, some of those values people put into God, put into different things, into different ethos regarding religion. I'm not saying any of that. Now, I have my preference. But that's my preference, and I'm not going to speak about that in this piece. What I really want to do is look over the efforts of what happened over the last 4 weeks. Clearly, FMF gave me a line, and that came from the selection process. That's the group that selects. That's the people that we're talking about that chose to go to the United States to bypass affiliate kids, to bypass national kids, in fact, that were part of the system that we're paying, and bring in people from outside of Mexico for national team. Obviously, they did that for the extrinsic value, not the intrinsic value, because the intrinsic would have clearly said you cannot do that. The ethos would have said you cannot do that. But once again, they're probably under pressure and they needed to win. Fine and dandy. Okay, you want to keep your position, and you want to make sure that your position is greater than anybody else's. Now, that you have to realize is the root of the problem, because at the same time it was the solution, because it gave me the solution. Because for them doing that, doing those acts, they had put themselves in violation, especially when they took U.S. government money for me to have an opinion and for me to say. So I did. So now we have the embassy who clearly don't have the ethics or ethos for the humanistic value of sport, even though that's why they wrote the sport for the 2026 World Cup. Then we have the FMF, who was living in the old guard and just taking advantage of the money pool that they had so they could actually try to win for Mexico. They were doing this for the extrinsic value, but at the same token, they opened themselves to opinion and to pressure, because in the outside world, when you take U.S. government money, there's guidance and there's clearly a reason why a business who takes government money has to be overseen. Now we move to the third place, FIFA itself. FIFA itself, maybe it's lawyered up. Everybody's lawyers. Their first opinion is protect lawyers, their jobs and their ethos. Why I didn't become a lawyer? was to protect even the guilty when they're guilty. So the first thing they did when I presented my case to them was to throw it down the drain. They tried to say, no, this is not our department. You got to go to another department. And that department, by the way, isn't open right now and it's taking complaints. How ironic. I can't believe they would even write that. But they did. Then all of a sudden, very shortly thereafter, the lawyer of the human rights, not the lawyer, but the agent portal come out and they started saying that I'm trying to act like an agent. Obviously, clearly, that was just to throw me under the bus. So the lawyer was protecting FIFA and protecting FMF. So clearly, that's clear. It's clear, okay, why that happened. Then why the human rights people of the FIFA jumped in and trying to say this case has nothing to do with us. It has to do, part of this case has to do with the embassy and let the embassy decide that. Once again, throwing it back to the embassy to let the embassy throw it under the bus or try to somehow block me. But at the same time and in parallel, and I should not be able to describe this, I started seeing more attacks upon my athletes. First, they try to get them to become one coach just mysteriously try to get one athlete to become part of their team, which would have separated all the boys and become part of Mineros and sign him. Well, they couldn't have done that because I had a legal representation and they needed to come through me first. And there was violations of monetary for doing that. And they violated it several times. Now, that's because the athletes told me. I wouldn't have known that if the athletes wouldn't have told me. But I let them do it because I was kind of in shock that they would even do that to me. But they did. So I let them do it. So, okay, I recorded it and put that into the complaint. Now, to make things even worse, we moved to another situation. So in that new situation, a new club, once again, everybody's bound by FMF. Everybody wants to eat tomorrow. Okay, so then all of a sudden we saw them try to put them all three, which was very strange for all three because only two were training. So they brought in the third guy, and he was trained with this, but just not in any clubs. And so he went to the tryout for Division II in Independent, and then I felt weird about that. Then finally I said, oh, wait a second. No. This is going to block them all the way around because now they can be professional, be part of Division II, and that's going to throw them under the bus. That means they can be part of no national teams. Now I have 14-year-olds who are clearly at a higher level than any 14-year-olds in the national team that I've seen so far. And yes, I have evaluated them. Yes, I have watched their games painfully. And I've sat and watched boys from the United States who were not part of any national competition that I know of. Though actually, if I knew where the competition was, I definitely would have taken the boys, even just sit and watch. They, in fact, were not. And they were on the screen, and I'm looking at them thinking, they're not as good as my three boys, not even close. Okay, so then I'm looking at them, and then I'm looking at, and I'm using my coach's head now. Then I'm looking at this new opportunity this new opportunity where they have a chance to be on Division II, which would block them. So, of course, I said no. Then all of a sudden, I go back to our club that we were at since September of last year. So now it makes 1 year that we were there. In and out. We were there for months. The boys didn't want to be there anymore because of various reasons. They left, and now we brought them back, and now they're glad to be back because they're glad to be around competition because ultimately these boys are competitive. They're competitive. They know they're good. You can't tell an athlete who knows he's talented that he's not talented. You can't tell him. You can't tell him when he looks at other athletes who are not as talented that they are more talented. You can't tell them that. They know what they're doing. That's talent. So you have to foster talent. You don't diminish talent. And I saw when I tell the boys oftentimes when they're playing with less talented athletes and those athletes start becoming very aggressive, I said, stop, guys, stop. Don't play at their level. You understand what they're doing, so just relax, calm down, okay? Maneuver, be smarter than they are, have a smarter brain, play with the athletes who are tougher, who are playing physical and only have violence to hit at you, smarter than them. That's why you have talent. Use your talent and your brain at the same time. Because I'm trying to teach them to be athletes on the field, on the pitch, so they can win. So they can win for any team, any position, any situation, so they can be garnished as the top competitor players. Now, that's a mentality. So now when I come back and I see what FMF did, then I see what FIFA did. And then they went to the human rights and tried to push it to the embassy. Now the embassy's quiet. Now FMF is quiet. Now FIFA's quiet. Now then they tried to put the boys into this Division 3, which would have blocked the Division 3 professional, which was actually the wasteland for that division, because these are the kids who are not invited into the system. What system is that? Well, that's the elite system that the League of MX has set up for all the schools, where you have to pay. Now, of course, they say there are scholarships for some kids. Now, I don't know any kids who've ever made it. I had one parent say that to me, that they were there and it didn't cost them anything, but that kid wasn't there anymore. He was sitting with the boys, and Abram was better than him, clearly. Okay, way better than him. So then I saw, and no offense to the kid, I'm just saying that Brown's very talented. So when I see what's going on, I clearly say to myself, oh, look at all the obstruction. They are acting as non-talented athletes who only have brute and might to knock down what's in front of them. So here we are, looking at the legal, looking at what's happening, looking at a system that doesn't want to change because it's billions of dollars, trillions of dollars traded by the FIFA president the other day to Donald Trump. Trillions of dollars. Where does that come from? From the seats? From the buckets in the seats? No, it does not come from the buckets in the seats. It comes from the sponsors. Sponsors. So when it boils down, FIFA is protecting its future with the sponsors. The embassy is protecting its future with the money that trickles down from the sponsors. The embassy is doing the same thing because it gave money to an organization that truly wasn't protecting the children, the human rights part of the grant, the only reason why it was granted. Everybody's protecting themselves so they can eat tomorrow. Sometimes we have to not eat tomorrow, eat less. Because if we don't, our overweightness, our maybe too many carbohydrates, maybe the physical strength of our body can't handle because of cardiac arrest, because of things that are now in our system as we've eaten too much. When I wrote this article, when I was 24, 25, 26 years old, I did it to help gymnastics. And I knew that as a foundation, if coaches would just listen, a few coaches, the sport would grow. It would be 10 times stronger than it ever has. Gymnastics right now is an amazing sport. I'm not going to say I had anything to do with it other than being a participatory in the change. But I can tell you my article is still valid today. What I'm saying right now is I only have 3 children I need to worry about. The ones who the parents entrusted me to help. And it's my moral obligation. It's my coach's athlete mentality that says, hey, FMF, let's do the right thing. Hey, FIFA, I understand you're protecting your sponsors, but perhaps you need to stop and think, because the intention here is of humanity, of sport. And that centers around the future, which is the children who are in the sport. And if you give them no opportunity, then you're doing it for all the wrong reasons.